Given its geographic location, Turkey wouldn't come off as a country with polar ambitions. Being nearly 3,000 kilometers from the Arctic Circle and 13,000 kilometers from Antarctica, the travel time alone would keep most Turkish scientists and travelers away. That was true for most of Turkey's modern history. But in the past 5 years, Turkey has planned and executed several expeditions to both regions. And now it has even bigger goals. Let's take a look at this report.
Nihai hedefimiz Antarktika Anlaşmalar Sistemi'nde gözlemci ülke statüsünden danışman ülke statüsüne geçerek kıtanın geleceğinde söz sahibi olmaktır.
And to discuss Turkey's interests in the polar regions, joining me from Kocaeli, Turkey, is Burcu Ozsoy. She is the director of the TÜBİTAK Polar Research Institute in Turkey. And from London, Klaus Dodds. He is a professor of geopolitics at Royal Holloway University of London. He is also the author of Border Wars, the Conflicts of Tomorrow. Burcu, Klaus, a warm welcome to you both. So, Burcu, what are the driving forces behind Turkey's ambitions to become a polar power, and where does it stand now?
Well, Turkey certainly has a growing polar power. We can see this in many areas. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, we helped many countries without hesitation. It's an inevitable fact that Turkey, which has increased its power with breakthroughs in many fields, will be a power for its with its scientific researchers in the polar regions in the future. In an international meeting held in 2019, it was stated by several polar countries that Turkey has surpassed 40% of the countries that have been conducting expeditions to Antarctica for many years. And especially in 2019, the first Turkish Arctic scientific expedition was carried out. And again, in the same year, our first research infrastructure was established in Antarctica. So therefore, I can simply say, considering all these breakthroughs of Turkey, it would not be wrong to call it a rising polar power.
Okay, so Klaus, what does being a polar power mean for countries? Can you speak on how important the polar regions have become, both in terms of scientific research, possible energy reserves, and politics as well?
Sure. I think the first thing to say is the Arctic and the Antarctic are very different regional spaces. So we really have to understand clearly that the Arctic is an inhabited homeland to 4 million people, and there are 8 Arctic states, with, of course, Russia being the most significant. The Antarctic is a frozen continent where there is no indigenous human population, and the only people who live there semi-permanently are scientists. So if we take each in turn quickly, the Arctic, yes, there has been for centuries resource interests in the Arctic, from whaling and sealing to oil and gas and strategic minerals. In the Antarctic, much of the resource potential, and this is where Turkey, I think, will want to play a role increasingly, really revolves around fishing and tourism. Mining is banned in Antarctica.
Okay.
And then, for example, in terms of the geopolitics and the governance, the Antarctic has a unique treaty regime called the Antarctic Treaty System that governs the Antarctic by consensus. So if, for example, you are a consultative party, in other words, a full member, you have equal voting rights with, say, some of the largest polar powers, like the United States or the United Kingdom. And then finally, in terms of science, in both parts of these spaces, science is incredibly important, not only for connecting to all the debates we're familiar with, like climate change, but science is also political power. And this is particularly true in the Antarctic. The more science you do, the more prestige, credibility, and presence you have in the Antarctic Treaty System. And this year, it's celebrating its 60th anniversary. And when it was created back in 1959, 1961, science was at the heart of everything that it does.
Yes, it looks like a very, very democratic platform. So, Burcu, we just mentioned Turkey is already an observer member of the Antarctic Treaty System and wants to become a consulted country. What is the latest and what are the challenges before this status of Turkey?
Since 1995, Turkey is one of the parties to the Antarctic Treaty, which has been protecting the country, the continent, actually.
Yes.
Turkey is currently holding a non-consultative state. The most important element of becoming a consultative party is to carry out considerable scientific research in the continent and to contribute to the international polar science literature. As you can imagine, to make it feasible, Turkey is planning to have a research station in Antarctica that will provide infrastructure for the long-term scientific studies. Well, we are doing our best on this subject with all our efforts. In the past months, we submitted the environmental impact assessment report regarding the establishment of the scientific research station. Being a consultative party will enable Turkey to play an active role in the decision-making mechanisms on the protection of the white continent.
So, Klaus, you just made a clear distinction between Antarctica system as well as the Arctic Council. We know that it's comprised of Russia, Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Greenland, Canada, and the US, and things are moving rather slowly when it's compared to the Antarctica system. What's the latest, and why do you think the Arctic, which used to be an overlooked territory, became a center of attention lately?
I think the answer to that is simply climate change. One of the things that you'll hear repeatedly said about the Arctic is that it's opening up. So it's this idea that the Arctic Ocean in particular is losing sea ice. And so we once thought of the Arctic as a frozen desert. And increasingly, particularly in the summer season, it's becoming open water. So that means that all kinds of parties who are not Arctic states, China being the most notable, but not the only one, are thinking about the Arctic Ocean as what we used to term a polar Mediterranean, something where you could pass through as opposed to simply get stuck in. The Arctic Council has been in existence since 1996. Now, Turkey wants to become an observer to the Arctic Council. And one of the challenges for Turkey, and it's not alone in this, is how many observers do the Arctic states and what are called the permanent participants, those are indigenous organizations, want. Plus, there is a worry that the more observers you have, that there is a danger, therefore, that the Arctic states begin to feel more and more outnumbered.
Yeah, it's also interesting, as you've just mentioned, another powerful country with eyes on the region is China. It calls itself a near-Arctic nation in 2018. So, Burcu, could Russia's 2-year chairmanship on the council could bring Turkey closer to its ambitions?
First of all, only the countries of that region can become members of the Arctic Council. With the future plans of the scientific research in the Arctic, Turkey aims to follow the recent developments in the Council and the activities carried out in the region as an observer member, hopefully in the future. From a scientific point of view, when we consider the world in a holistic approach, I think that the Arctic is equally important as Antarctica.
Mhm.
Russia is a country that has long-term relations with Turkey in political, commercial, and in many different fields. It also has a large geographical area in the Arctic.
Yes.
I believe that the two-year chairmanship will accelerate the development of the joint scientific activities on the polar science in cooperation with Russia.
Okay. So, Klaus, last question. How has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted both organizations' scientific efforts?
The COVID pandemic has been really disruptive in two areas, I would say. First of all, in Antarctic science, quite a few of the ambitions that countries had for science and also infrastructural upgrade have been disrupted because we have had COVID outbreaks in Antarctica at various research stations, and everybody is keen to try and create a COVID secure space.
Mm-hmm.
In the Arctic, we've also had similar challenges, but the thing that I would really highlight is not science, but actually it's the impact on indigenous and local communities in the Arctic. It's well worth remembering that healthcare, particularly in smaller Arctic communities, is really quite basic. So there's a real danger that you have, in essence, local public health emergencies. And then the final thing I'd just say very quickly is that one of the things COVID revealed is the presence of Turkish and Central Asian workers actually on Russian infrastructural projects. So one of the subtle ways that Turkey is really embedding itself in the Arctic is actually through the movement of labor, not just, for example, the things we're familiar with, like science.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Klaus, Burcu, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.